Go ahead and have a seat for just a moment. Before coming here, my wife and I pastored in New Jersey for 16 years. And I don't know if you know this, but New Jersey has, New York area has one of the highest concentrations of Jewish people in the world. In fact, even if you count Israel, I think New York City is still the third highest concentration of anywhere in the world. And so there's a lot of Messianic Jewish friends that we would have. And in our grocery stores, we had a whole section of kosher food. So kosher means it's acceptable, it fulfills all the requirements of Jewish law to be eaten at Passover. And so we have this whole section. One of the things that's in there is matzah. So matzah is like this large, think of a large saltine cracker, all right? But there's certain requirements for matzah for it to be acceptable, kosher, kasar lepeshach, the Hebrews might say, kosher for Passover. And so the first thing is, it has to be unleavened. Isn't that interesting? What's leaven a symbol of in the Bible? Frequently, it's a symbol of sin. So this piece of bread has to be without sin. Second thing this bread has to have, and it's a flat, like a saltine cracker, right? It has to have holes pierced in it. Wasn't he pierced for our transgressions? And then in the process of making it, they actually take a very sharp knife and they score the outside edges just to make these little stripes. By his stripes, we are healed. And finally, they have to bake this thing to just the perfect temperature so that the surface almost blisters. Just these little blisters would just start to open up. And doesn't the word say that he was beaten and he was bruised for us? There are so many Old Testament pictures, there are so many Jewish pictures that point directly to Jesus Christ. And at Passover, the Jewish people, they would take these 3 pieces of matzah. They have a special thing they do during the Passover Seder. And they would always take the middle piece of matzah. Isn't that interesting? Not the top one, not the middle piece of matzah. And they would pull it out. Why don't you pull out your little emblem right now? And what would they do? They would take that middle piece of matzah and they would break it. They would break it. Why don't you break your piece right now? What did Jesus say as he was celebrating the Passover meal with his disciples, and he got to the bread, and we're not exactly sure what that bread looked like, but he got to the bread, and what did he say? This, the bread, this is my body, which is broken for you. So as we partake of this together in just a moment, let's keep in mind the sinless, pierced, striped, beaten and bruised body of Jesus. That he went through all of that so that you and I could know him and love him and serve him and commune with him. Let's eat the broken body together. You guys know that the Passover meal, the Last Supper, we call it, the Passover meal was a celebration of Passover, which was the ancient history of the Jewish people when they came out of Egypt, the Exodus and all of that. And it was highlighted by that meal where each family would take a lamb and they would sacrifice this lamb and eat the lamb, and they had to get ready to go at a moment's notice. And do you remember what they had to do with the blood of that lamb? They had to take a branch, they had to dip it in the blood, And most of our storybooks, it says to put it on the lintel and the doorposts. And so most of our story posts, like the lintel is that piece above the door, and so they would just splash some blood there, we think. And then the doorposts are these things. And so in our minds, we see these splashes, okay, just around the door. But I have this Messianic Jewish friend, and he said, I don't think that's what the Old Testament actually says. You'll have to check with them because I'm not an Old Testament scholar. But here's what he said. He says, you're supposed to strike the lintel, the top piece, once. And based on the language that he was understanding, you would hit that top lintel once, and the blood would drip down the middle of the door. And then the Hebrew specifically says you're to strike the mezuzot. You're like, well, what in the world's a mezuzot? Jewish homes. The guy across the street from my house in New Jersey had what's called a mezuzah. It's this small little metal thing that's tacked onto the door frame right about here, about 4 or 5 feet high, and it signifies that it's a Jewish home. And the Jewish families would only have one of those, but in the Hebrew it's plural. So if there would have been another one, where would it have been? It would have been at the same size, same height, on the other door frame. They were to dip the blood, strike the lintel once, and the blood would come dripping down the door. Then with one strike, next time with this blood, strike the mezuzot one time. I'm not sure, but the children of Israel may have avoided the angel of death with the cross of blood stricken across their doorpost. Isn't that amazing? Let's open this emblem that we have. The word says, by his stripes, by his wounds, we are healed. And the New Testament quotes that, and it talks about physical healing. It's not just talking about spiritual healing. It's not just talking about forgiveness, but all those things are included. But it's talking about physical healing. And so before you partake of this, I want you to think for a moment of somebody in your life that really needs a physical touch from God. It might be you. You might be like, it's me, Jesus. I'm the one that needs physical touch today. And just silently, won't you just right now say that name before the Lord and say, Lord, would you touch? Would you touch me? Lord, would you touch my son? Would you touch my daughter? God, would you touch that family member that's hurting right now and desperately, desperately needs a touch from you? And then together, let's just say, thank you, Jesus, for what you're going to do as we partake together. We're going to